Joining us now to discuss is the chair of the Los Angeles County Republican Party, Roxanne Hoge, and Elex Messersmith, political commentator and host of the Everybody Settle Down YouTube channel. Eric, welcome to the show for the first time. Great to have you here. Roxanne, welcome back. So Kiros talked to my colleague Laura Coates in the last hour here on CNN. Here's some of what she said.
I think moderate Democrats would really be better served if they actually spoke with voters themselves instead of being afraid of what they think is taking place in our party right now.
Eric, do you think moderates are missing the message, missing the communication?
Well, they're missing the organization and the energy for sure. And that's where it is on the Democratic side right now. In certain districts, I think we should pump the brakes a little bit on this takeover talk. We had a few races in New York City where the DSA candidate won. We're going to have one in Colorado. But the Democrats will maybe have 10 candidates in the House to get through in the election that are DSA or DSA affiliated that take a seat in Congress next year, maybe 15 at the max. And in the big key races, like Senate races in Alaska, in Texas, in Iowa, that are going to determine control of the Senate, they're not running as Democratic socialists. So this is a party civil war, but I think it's a jump to say the DSA has completely taken over at this point. I'd equate it to like 2008 with the Tea Party in the Republican movement, 2010.
Yeah, 2010.
They had some inroads, they won, but I don't think they took over the party.
Well, the Freedom Caucus kind of did take over the party and forced the speaker into different things. I mean, if the margins are so small and you get 10, 12, 15 people, you can essentially run Congress, especially because some of the Republicans have changed the rules where one person could get rid of the speaker, as Kevin McCarthy of California learned. What's your take on all of this?
Did you hear the sound while Hakeem was speaking? I believe there were chants of "you're next, which is what the DSA is saying to Democrat leadership. And while it's interesting to game this out in terms of what's happening in Congress, you, at your peril, ignore what the DSA, the gains they have made in local races. They hold seats on the LA City Council. They are coming. They're coming for you. And I know that because as chair of the Republican Party, I get calls from elected Democrats going, for the love of God, help us push back.
But yet, there are clearly a lot of voters that are going for this.
Yes, and it's unfortunate. I honestly say, as the parent of young adults, that ceding ground in education and entertainment, as the Republican Party did for too long, has allowed this narrative to take hold where otherwise intelligent young people will tell you with a straight face that we have socialism because we have Social Security. Like,
I mean, the Democratic Party, the more establishment elements were smart. What they would do is co-opt some of this, like the Republicans did with the Tea Party. The Republican establishment didn't embrace everything that the Tea Party wanted, but they embraced some things, including immigration, which really helped them down the road.
Including Donald Trump.
Yes, including Donald Trump.
Case in point, right?
And so I think the socialists, obviously, some of the things they say are crazy. Abolishing the police, having open borders. These are pretty wild ideas. But talking about the wealth inequality in America and how that has expanded to really a pretty astronomical degree, and how young people in particular are struggling so hard to afford the necessities of life, and they're not in love with the system that we have right now. They feel like the system is working against them. I think if you can capture that energy, that's a winning message for Democrats or even for Republicans.
And some of the fringes of the DSA, not everybody in the DSA, are certainly pretty close to anti-Semitism,
yes,
if not anti-Semitism. And that's
playing
a little,
footsie with
a
it.
little scary as well. So let's talk about our conversation we just had with Adam Schiff, which I thought was very interesting. What he said about John Roberts, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Listen.
But I think it was more important for Roberts to sit at the center of power on the court than be relegated to a minority on that court. And so he did what he thought, I think, was in his personal best interest, which was not in the country's interest or true to the Constitution. And his legacy will be that, enabling Donald Trump.
His legacy enabling Donald Trump. Probably not how Republicans see it, right?
Completely disingenuous of Schiff to say that, because the one thing you can say about Roberts is he makes everybody mad. So if both sides think you haven't given them what they want, then you're not enabling anyone.
Yeah, it's kind of like being a good cable news host, right?
Kinda.
But I mean, do you agree with what Schiff had to say? Because his point is, look, that by doing the immunity deal, which was to give President Trump immunity from prosecution, it kind of made everything else irrelevant. That was the big decision, and everything else is fine. And to get, maybe we vote on birthright citizenship this way or on this way. But the really big important stuff, he's been with the president.
Look, I think two things can be true at the same time. It can be true that Roberts has been a very solidly conservative justice who has led a conservative court, especially when it comes to things like expanding executive power. I mean, the decision today in the Slaughter case was a massive expansion of executive power. But there are big cases where Roberts has gone the other way. I mean, he is the deciding vote that upheld Obamacare. That was John Roberts. He upheld DACA. That was John Roberts. Today, upholding Lisa Cook, letting her stay on the Fed board. I think tomorrow he'll probably write the majority opinion that strikes down the birthright citizenship executive order of Trump. So it's not fair to say that Roberts has been a lapdog for the right on every issue. Maybe you could say that about Thomas or Alito, but not Roberts.
And in that particular case, he upheld immunity for presidents, not just for Donald Trump.
Let's talk about 2028, because there's already talk about 2028, including on CNN. We want to put up a headline from CNN.com that was just posted over the weekend. Behind the scenes with John Ossof, the 2026 and maybe 2028 Democratic viral hit. He is the senator from Georgia, 39 years old, running in one of, if not the most important, Senate races in the entire country. Often on the weekends, he'll go viral because he will do videos that his campaign posts of him talking about corruption, especially involving the Trump family. Manu Raju of CNN talked to him about that theme.
The president and his family are enriching themselves to the tune of billions of dollars, and the president is trying to build a monument to himself. I think it's obscene. I think he's a failed president, and he's deeply unpopular in Georgia.
The CNN reporting said that he was considering not running for re-election because he's got two young kids, 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. He said it's very painful for him to leave them, and that he's not really eyeing running for president in 2028. But there has been this draft Ossof movement.
Yeah, people always say that in the off year. And it's not really fair to ask him anyway, because he's not going to say 4 months before a potentially tough Senate race, you know what, I really want to run for president in 2 years. So I'm not saying I don't believe him. I'm just saying I think if he wins re-election, which I think he will, by a fairly comfortable margin in a race that Republicans really targeted aggressively in Georgia, that gives you a pretty strong case heading into 2028. And there's a reason he's now second in the betting odds behind Gavin Newsom to be the Democratic nominee. Now, it's early. A lot can change, but people see the potential. They see the talent. He's a former documentary filmmaker, which is one of the reasons his videos look so good.
And made films about corruption.
Yes. And
which is why that's the theme. He's going on that theme of all themes to say, folks, you may be Republicans, you may be independents, but you don't like corruption.
And lots of Democrats hit the obvious, I think, corruption of Donald Trump, but he does it in a way that I think is the most effective, giving specific examples of how the Trump family has benefited so handsomely from the presidency. And then, but here's the thing he does that's, I think, really effective, is he ties it back to a larger theme about corruption in politics and money in politics and the influence of that. And he doesn't just leave it with attacking Trump. He builds it. And I think I think he's got the skills.
And how that potentially hurts you, the taxpayer, in the process. Your thoughts on him as a Republican? Do you think he would be one of the tougher people to go up against, or one of the weaker?
Well, I think it's just great that he was able to be such a good documentary filmmaker with his family's millions. There's nothing wrong with that. But let's just say, if you want to talk about nepotism,
exactly like the president came from nothing.
Yeah, no one was born in a log cabin
a
here,
self-made man,
right?
okay.
So neither party is free from that. And I think every elected official who was born in America looks in the mirror while they're running and hears "Hail to the Chief." However, I just don't think he's going to make it. Yeah, he is second to Gavin Newsom in the betting odds, but Polymarket and Kalshi are not polls, and the polling is completely upside down. Now, it's a big, wide open field on the Democrat side. I don't think it's so great. And I think, given what we were talking about earlier with the far left and their little playing footsie with anti-Semites, I don't think John Ossof is going to make it.
Well, he's very good on being on message. He's very disciplined. He doesn't speak that much, and when he does, he stays on message. Question is, in a long presidential cycle, what's he like off script?
Right.
And does he have the fire in his belly to be able to do all of the rest of that on a debate stage? We don't know because we've never seen him do something like that.
He doesn't do a lot of adversarial media, doesn't go on a lot of podcasts. He will have to do that. But on the Jewish thing, because he is...
To wrap it up real quick.
I was saying, he is Jewish. He might be the Democrat that can thread the needle. Because even though he's Jewish, he's very critical of the Israeli government, very critical of Benjamin Netanyahu. He has credibility on that issue. So it's possible that I think he could fill that lane in between the two extremes of the Democratic Party.
Ask Scott Wiener how that's working out for him.
Yeah, as a Jew, some people read a little more Jewish than other people, and John Ossof may not read as Jewish as Josh Shapiro does, for whatever that's worth. Both of you, thank you so much for coming in. We appreciate it. This is a great panel. I have to have you back.